Okay, so today we are going to be getting into Unit 1, Activity 3. So this is our third activity, and this is our last activity of Unit 1. And so if we take a look, as always, I suggest that you start with the announcement. And so I posted this announcement this morning, as I always do on the first day of the school week. And so you'll see Unit 1, Activity 3, and you've got your link to enter the activity, and we'll get into it here in a minute. It is the biggest and final activity for Unit 1. And when I say it's the biggest activity, I mean that it has the biggest assignment. So you're going to have to write your first essay for me in this activity. And it's not a typical essay. It's not what we would call an academic essay. It's going to be what we call a narrative essay. So you're going to have to write an essay about yourself. And we'll talk about how to do that here in this video. And so when you go through the content in this activity, it's going to focus on what we call narrative writing. And narrative writing essentially means personal writing, or writing about yourself, or telling stories from your own life. Okay, and we'll talk about that here. I would suggest that you take notes on the narrative elements when you're reading the content, and that you practice identifying the elements in the sample narrative essays that you'll see inside the activity. Once you've gone through the content and you've seen what a narrative is, as I said, for the assignment, you're going to have to write your own narrative essay. And I've got 3 steps that you should follow in order to write your essay. For your final draft, you must submit a text copy of your narrative essay. If you choose, you can also submit an audio copy. So this is one of the chances this semester where you can practice your speaking, and you can read out loud your narrative essay and submit that as well too. And I'll talk more about that. That's an option. It's not required. Your narrative essay is not going to be due on Friday. Usually Friday, the ending of the week, is the due date. But since Friday is a PA day and St. Michael's will be closed on Friday, and also since this is a bigger assignment than we've done in the previous 2 activities, I've made the due date Monday. So feel free to take the full weekend if you need it to finish this assignment. And then, of course, as usual, next Monday, we will start a new activity, and we'll actually start Unit 2 next Monday. All right, so with that said, we're going to jump into Unit 1, Activity 3. And if you click on my link, you will see Unit 1, Activity 3 is called Narrative Writing. And of course, you'll be sent into the content. Always do the content first. Go through the full content before you try to do the assignment. And in the Minds On section, they're going to try to explain what is a narrative. And essentially, a narrative is usually a very specific story from the writer or the speaker's own life. So a narrative is a personal story. And so I've got a little kind of silly example here of How the Grinch Stole Christmas. And you can see how there is a narrator telling the story as the Grinch goes through the actions of the story. And this is just a small clip from the movie, but you can see an example of how a narrator would work in a movie. Okay. I like this line here. It says, "Chances are you narrate stories every day. I mean, didn't you just tell your friend about the funny thing that happened to you last night?" So I guess what I'm trying to say here is you are already narrating. You already tell your own stories every day of your life. Now you're just going to have to put it on paper and submit it to me. And so this shouldn't be a brand new style of writing or thinking. We already tell narratives from our own lives every day. All right. When we get into the action, it's going to cover the different elements that make up a narrative. So there are certain things that go into a narrative. And if we take a look here, there's a nice list here. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Perfect. 10. We've got 10 different elements that go into a narrative. Some of these are elements that go into any story, whether they're a Hollywood movie, like a fictional story, or whether they're a personal narrative story that's true to life. Um, you've got a point of view, and in a narrative, a point of view is always first person. A narrative is always told from your specific point of view. So you will use first person when you write this narrative essay. Secondly, every narrative has to have a theme, it has to have a message at the beginning and at the end so that the reader can hopefully learn something from your story. There should be a tone, like it should be, some people tell narratives that are happy stories, sad stories, scary stories, romantic stories, exciting stories. You can tell narratives from all sorts of different tones, but you should have usually one specific tone throughout the story. A narrative should be told in chronological order, meaning that it has a beginning, a middle, and an end. A narrative has to have characters. You can't have a story without characters. And you, as the author, if you're the one writing or telling a narrative, you are automatically the main character because you're telling your own story. This is something that students sometimes have trouble with because it's a bit new. A narrative has to have dialogue. There has to be conversation, speaking out loud between characters in the story. Doesn't have to be a lot of dialogue, but there has to be at least a little bit of conversation between characters to bring the story to life, to develop the characters, to make the narrative feel real and make it feel like an authentic story. Every narrative has to have a setting, so it has to have a location and a time period, and you want to be very specific with that. When I have students that write narratives for me, they often will tell me, when I was growing up in my hometown, and then they tell me what happened to them. But they don't tell me the name of the town or what the town was like, whether it was a big city or a small village, whether it was by the sea or in the mountains. They don't really give me any sense of the location. And then they sometimes don't give me a sense of time. So they'll say, when I was growing up, and okay, well, was that 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 5 years ago? You want to be specific about your setting, about your location and time when you're telling a narrative. You also have to have a conflict or a problem. If there is no conflict, there is no story, and therefore there is no narrative. So you can't just tell me a narrative essay where there's no problem, where everything goes perfectly and you're just describing the best day of your life and there is no problem. There has to be some sort of problem. Doesn't have to be a huge problem, doesn't have to be a scary problem. Maybe it's something funny, maybe it's something, it could be anything, but there has to be some sort of conflict or problem in order to have a narrative. Also, a narrative should be descriptive, meaning that you're going to describe your characters and your locations, and you're going to use descriptive language. It's not your typical cookie cutter 5-paragraph essay where you're just trying to give facts and explanation. You're trying to make the reader feel like they're in the narrative with you, like they're experiencing what you experienced. So it's important to write in description. If you introduce a character or a location, describe them a little bit. You don't have to spend a whole paragraph describing them, but give a little bit of detail. Okay. What else can I say? This right here, these elements, really important. You're going to need to incorporate all of these in your assignment this week, and on your midterm exam, I might expect you to be able to identify these different elements in a narrative. So it's important that that you understand the elements that make up a narrative. What else can I tell you? We've got some practice here. So I've given you 4 narratives from a website called This I Believe. And so what I'm going to suggest is that you take a look. You don't have to read through all of these, but maybe look at two of them, and see if you can answer these questions. So I took the elements, the narrative elements that we just went over, and I tried to turn them into questions so that you could practice identifying, for example, characters and dialogue and locations and conflict in a narrative. So again, when these questions are based entirely on these elements right here. You don't have to read through all four of these and answer all 10 of these questions for all four, but I'd try two just as practice, just to get a sense that you know the different parts of a narrative. I especially like this one right here. These narrative essays are written by different people. They're real people writing their own real stories. They don't all follow, what an English teacher would say in terms of the proper structure. They kind of have some of them do their own thing. So you'll see very different styles of narratives here. But I think The Place I Go Home is the one that maybe does the best job of including everything that I would want to see in your narrative. So maybe take a look at it. And so if I just open it up just to show you, it's going to open up, it's going to open up to this, I believe, and it's going to open up to the specific essay. And this is Cheryl Dukes here. She's the author. And she's going to tell you her story. And so you can read her narrative right here. And you can actually listen to it if you want as well, too. So you can hear her speaking and telling you her narrative. And then again, the goal is to take a look and to answer these questions to show that you understand the different parts or the different elements of a narrative. If I move on here, after we've taken a look at the elements and you've practiced, the goal is going to be to come up with your own story and your own theme to write your own narrative. And so I'll get you started. I'll get you thinking here about what you can write about. My biggest advice for you is you have to choose one specific event from your life that you want to tell me. It could be funny, it could be sad, it could be romantic, it could be exciting. Like I said, it could be any story from your life that has characters, setting, a beginning, a middle, and an end, and has some sort of problem or conflict. Some students like to tell me very deep and serious stories. I get a lot of stories that are about medical issues and things like that. And if you're comfortable writing something serious and dramatic, that's fine. If you're not, that's absolutely fine too. I have students that tell me about a sporting event that they participated in that was really important to them. Or I have students tell me about something, a day in the life of what happened to them and their pet, their dog or their cat or something, right? I've had lots of different stories about lots of different things. But my one big advice that I would give you is pick one specific event or day. Don't try to tell me your whole life story. You don't have time to write a whole book here or to write even 10 pages here. You're just going to be writing your narrative essay in about a page and a half or 2 pages. So you want to be very specific and come up with a very specific story that you would like to tell. For example, I've had a student tell me about their driver's test and about taking their driver's test. And they focused entirely on that driver's test. That's the story they told. They didn't tell me about their school or their family life or anything else. They just focused on one event from their life. If you'd like, you can let me know what topic you'd like to write about through email, and I can tell you what I think. Okay. But remember, this is a narrative essay, not a research essay. Your essay will be written in your own words and based on your own personal experiences. So This is not what we call an academic essay. This is not where you go look for research on the internet. This is an essay that must be written in your own words and using your own writing style. More than any other assignment that I do this semester, this essay is supposed to be, this assignment is supposed to be personal. It's supposed to be you communicating in your own voice, right? And so it's extremely important that you write in your own words. I cannot grade something that is written in other people's words, or is written by AI, or is written, by somebody else on a different website. So just I hope I'm clear with that, I guess. All right. I do give you some possible topics to think about here, like, what did you learn from your biggest mistake, or what did you learn from the biggest challenge of your life? What is your proudest moment? Why does it make you proud? So all of these might just make you think of a specific story that you would like to tell from your life. When we get to the bottom, you can actually click this page here. This, I believe, it's the website that we were already on, that this story is on, or this narrative is on. If you click here, it'll go to their theme page, and you can see all sorts of different narratives written about different topics, and that might give you some ideas as well too about what you might want to write about from your own life. Remember that you are going to have a theme as well too. A narrative has two main parts. It has a personal story, so that's the middle, as you'll see. There's a personal story that you're telling about your life, but then there is also a theme, which is a message or a lesson, something that you're going to attach to the beginning in the introduction and to the end in your conclusion, that kind of bookend your story. So whatever your story is, you have to have a lesson or a message that you can give to attach to that story. Okay. With that said, this is the ending of the content page, and you can click on the assignment button. And you'll see, of course, the assignment, as I've already said, is a narrative essay. And I've broken it down into 3 steps. So step 1 is a narrative essay outline. So before you write your narrative essay, you should consider how the personal story you plan to tell will support your theme. To help you do that, you can download and fill out this document here. So if I click on this, it'll open up a Google Doc that looks like this. And this is just an outline. So what is the overall theme, the message that you want to say at the beginning of your narrative essay? How does that message, why is that message important to you? And then in the body paragraphs, what you have is your story. So what is the beginning of your personal story that you want to tell? What's the middle of the story? What's the end of the story? Right? So you do have to have a clear beginning, middle, and end. Your story can't just be left in the middle. You have to have a clear beginning, middle, and end. Okay. You also have to have some sort of conclusion where you go back to your theme and you show how your personal story fits with your theme. So that's your basic structure of a narrative essay. You have an introduction that establishes a theme. You have body paragraphs that tell a story from your life, and then you have a conclusion that wraps up and links your theme to your story. And that's the basic structure. Once you fill out that narrative essay outline, you can share it with me if you want, and through email, and I'll tell you what I think. You don't have to hand in the narrative essay outline to be graded. It's just something as rough work so that you can plan what you want to do. I would say this too, sorry, one last thing. With the narrative essay outline here, I've shared a copy with everyone. So this copy here, you should be able to open, but unlike me, you won't be able to type in this document. If you could, then all the students would be typing on top of each other. So what you need to do, and you'll see the instructions here, and the instructions are also in the course website, you need to click File, Make a Copy, and then you can call it whatever you like. So I would call it, Derek's, narrative essay outline. And then you would go Make a Copy, and it would open here, and now it's yours and nobody else can see it, and you can type whatever you like in these boxes. It's now your copy, your personal copy. Keep in mind that this, again, is just your rough work. You're going to have to open up a new Google Doc and type out your actual essay and submit that in a later step here, okay? Speaking of which, once you're done your outline, you can type your rough draft. And so use your narrative outline as a guide and write the rough draft of your essay. So your narrative essay should, and then I list everything that needs to be included, and it's all of the elements that we talk about in the content. So again, if you go through the content and you understand the narrative elements, you should not be surprised at what I expect you to include. Keep one thing in mind here. A narrative essay is broken up into multiple short paragraphs. It looks more like a short story than an academic essay. So I don't expect you to write the traditional introduction, body 1, body 2, body 3, conclusion. We'll do that style of essay later. In this activity, what you're doing is you're telling a narrative, which is, again, a little bit different than a standard essay. Just to show you, I'll show you an example again. If I go back to the example that we were previously looking at here, this narrative essay here, you'll notice that it's broken up into, so here's one paragraph, here's a second paragraph, here's a third paragraph, a fourth paragraph, a fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, I think, different paragraphs there, right? When you write a narrative, you break everything up just the way you would in a short story or a novel, because you're telling a story more than giving information or making an argument, right? And so every time the location changes, every time a new character speaks, every time the time changes, you want to start a new paragraph. And feel free, sometimes you'll have paragraphs that might only be one sentence, okay? There isn't an exact rule. It's kind of the writer's sort of choice, but keep in mind that you're not writing a traditional 5-paragraph essay, which you might be used to from OLC. You're writing more of a creative essay where you're telling a story. Okay. All right. With that said, again, take a look at the requirements here, and if you have any trouble, let me know. I've given you a narrative essay edit sheet that you can take a look at after you're done the narrative essay, your rough copy, and that sheet just asks some sort of like a checklist set of questions here, making sure that you've included everything in your narrative essay, and then it asks you to think about your strengths and maybe some weaknesses in your narrative essay that you could make stronger. So this is just a little edit sheet that you can look at when you're done your rough copy, just to kind of gauge your own essay. If you want, you can use this yourself and use it as a self-edit sheet. Or if you prefer, you could ask somebody else in the class, if you know somebody else in the class, or you could ask somebody else that you know in your life to read your narrative essay and to tell you what they think. And they can kind of answer these questions for you. And it's nice to get a second pair of eyes to take a look at your narrative to see how readers will respond to your narrative essay. Okay. All right. With that said, once you do your outline first, you do a rough draft, and then you type out, you submit a completed and finished narrative essay. And I just remind you of all the requirements right here. And I do suggest that if you choose an alternative option, you can give me an audio version. I still need a text version. The text version I need to see, and I need to be able to grade your writing. But it's nice to get an audio version as well too. I'm not going to penalize you if you don't give an audio version. It's just an option if you want. So what you can do is you can record yourself speaking and saying your narrative essay. And I've given you a little guide here on how to do that. You can record yourself right inside the course website, or if you want, I mean, obviously, you can just record yourself using your phone or whatever device you have at home, and you can submit that as well too. So again, it's your choice. You have to submit a written copy of your narrative essay to the Dropbox. But if you want, you can also submit an audio version. And I think that's it. I think I've got the rubric. This is how I will grade your assignment, so you can take a look at that. But that's it. That's our lesson for this week. It's all about narrative writing. So.